Good afternoon, and welcome to a Tuesday afternoon Zoom program from the Genealogy Center of the Allen County Public Library in Fort Wayne, Indiana. My name is Curt Witcher. I manage the Genealogy Center, and even more importantly than that, I get to spend the next hour with you talking about something I'm pretty passionate about, that I really enjoy using, something that is way far from perfect, but still kind of cool, and can help us find our family stories a lot easier. So this afternoon's topic is going to be about PERSI. But before we do that, I want to share my screen and show you how to find today's handout. We'll mention this a couple times throughout the presentation, but there is a handout. We're going to show you that in a second. And this is being recorded, and soon that recording will be available on YouTube. So we've got all the bases covered this afternoon, I believe. So sharing my screen, I'm going to bring up the Allen County Public Library's Genealogy Center homepage. You're probably quite familiar with this by now, but if you scroll all the way down to the bottom left-hand corner, here's the lineup of programs. You'll notice too, excitingly, that we have a number of March programs loaded already. But today's program is number 1 at the top, so we click on this. Finding periodical articles about your geographic area of interest, how you use PERSI to do that. The handout is right here. You click on the handout, and there it is. You can save it to your computer, download it, whatever you want to do with it, follow along as we go through the presentation. But I think you'll be frustrated if you follow along on the handout, because it really doesn't follow the presentation. It gives you a lot of really great information about PERSI, about the history of PERSI, about how to use it, the URL to get to the Periodical Source Index, which is now free, but I do not follow this handout. This is sort of an evergreen handout, something that will help you as you continue to make the Periodical Source Index something in your toolkit to help you find more about your family story. So you come to the ACPL Genealogy Center homepage. It's simply genealogycenter.org, or you can copy this URL up at the top. Genealogycenter.org is pretty quick, pretty easy to get to. While we're here, just want to point out a few things, as we are prone to do during the introduction to our programs. If you click on Genealogy Community, there is a link for Ask a Genealogy Librarian. We so encourage you to do that. There's no question that's out of bounds relative to family history and genealogy. Go ahead and ask questions. If you're stumped about a resource, how to cite something, what's the best methodology for this particular problem or research challenge, go ahead and send us an email. We'll be happy to provide you with our advice and counsel, maybe point you in some new directions. Genealogy Gems is our monthly electronic newsletter. We don't give those addresses away. We don't use them for anything else except to tell you about new things happening in the collection. And at the end of every month, you get this newsletter and you get all the programs for the next month. So it's really a neat way to stay up to date on Genealogy Center programs. And then YouTube, that's where you find all of our recorded programs. We'll take a quick look here. There are 115 past virtual programs that you can enjoy any time of the day and night you want to. I call these great insomnia busters, right? Get up in the middle of the night, can't sleep, listen to a great Genealogy Center program. So I just commend all those resources to you to help you find your family stories. Again, my name is Curt Witcher, and it's my real honor and pleasure to spend the next few minutes with you talking about the Periodical Source Index. Not that anyone's keeping score, but this will be the 3rd time, I believe, in the new year here in 2022, where we have at least touched on PERSI. My colleague Elizabeth did a really fine presentation on PERSI a few weeks ago. Time gets compressed for me. I'm taking a really more narrow approach to PERSI. We're just going to look at the Periodical Source Index as it relates to finding articles on our geographic areas of interest, okay? So that's the approach we're going to take. Before we do that, though, I want to just maybe convince you that perhaps the Periodical Source Index really is something that is of benefit to you in your research, helping you find your family stories. I'm going to turn off my camera so we have a really great view of the slides. There aren't many of them, but we're going to go from a really quick slide presentation to some actual live searching. I want to do some searches, show some features of the new Periodical Source Index. So why periodicals? Need to unfreeze my screen here. There we go. What is PERSI and why periodicals? Let's handle what is PERSI first. PERSI stands for Periodical Source Index, and those words are kind of intentional. So we're dealing with periodicals, so it's not books and other original records. It's periodicals, secondary sources. And it's an index, and it's not an every name index. It says source index. So that should give you your first tip, clue that this is something a little different. And we'll talk about some of those differences in just a moment. This project will be going on forever because people continue to publish in serial form, quarterly, monthly, annually, 6 times a year, whatever suits the society, the organization, or the individual. The Periodical Source Index actually started in 1985. That's like forever ago. We do look at every single article that we index, but yes, it started almost BC, before computers. In fact, the very first publication was in print form, and the original was spun off of a dot matrix printer. Hopefully not everyone on this call knows what a dot matrix printer is, because then you would consider yourself blessed that you had to, you were able to skip over that little wonderful piece of technology. The Periodical Source Index has over 3 million subject entries. So 3 million plus articles from many thousands of periodical titles have been categorized by subject, and we put them in a searchable database. That's a pretty big chunk of data. That's a lot of information. So if you think about, well, Curt, what do people really publish in periodicals, in magazines, in quarterlies? Well, if you think for a moment, everything that you have run across in your genealogical research, I've looked at Bible records. I've looked at family photo albums. I've looked at courthouse records. I've done cemetery stomping. I've looked at church records and obituaries and newspaper accounts. There is the possibility that for every type of record you have found on microfilm, on the internet, in a monograph, in a book, there's the possibility that that record may exist for your area of geographic interest in a periodical. I like to tell people, of all the things that you've looked at, all the things that you've used to put together to find and preserve and present your family story, if you ignore periodicals, you could potentially be ignoring about 1/3 of the data that's available to you to find your family story. Maybe you're one of those lucky people that have so much information available to you that you can ignore, forget, not find 1/3 of it and still be okay. Still really find great information about your family, still be able to really put context, put flesh on the bones of your family. But if you're like me, you're scrapping for every piece of information you can find to try to put that family story together. So, if you say, periodicals, who cares? Well, if you're fortunate enough to just have so much information that you can't possibly wade through it all, well, okay, maybe you don't care. But if you're like a lot of us, periodicals can be really, really amazing. So just a quick look at some periodicals we just received literally in the last week. So Ancestry Trails, thin publication, less than 20 pages. It's February, March of this year. They have 2 pages on tips for researching German genealogy. Some of these may be, okay, great. But some of them may be, hey, I never thought of that. Maybe I need to go back and check how I have analyzed information that I have found. Jay County, Indiana Journal, like so many county historical and genealogical societies, they publish snippets over time about things that are happening in their community. So 100-year history of Coca-Cola Bottling Company in Portland, Indiana. And then, as many of them do, excerpts, transcriptions, abstractions of things from newspapers for a century ago. Pretty amazing things. Also from the same Jay County publication, a photograph over a century old. Operators, employees of the Central Union Telegraph Company over on the right-hand side, a 1943 Indianapolis newspaper about that area. Pretty amazing stuff. Also, from this week's new periodicals coming into the Genealogy Center, this particular publication on New Mexico marriages from the early part of the 19th century. Historical Wyoming, and before you jump to the state of Wyoming, no, this is Wyoming County, New York. And where will you find a published book history on Cowlsville, Wyoming County, New York? You'll probably be really hard pressed to find one, but yet so many periodicals may have nice little historical snippets, as well as record groups, births, marriages, deaths, probate for these particular towns that you'll really be hard pressed to find if you're not actually on site in the town. Some historical ones that I just wanted to put in front of you just for your attention: Tree Tracers from Texas. It covers a multitude of counties. First article is a church records from Jackson County, business 1916 Comanche County. You can just float right down the screen there and see the various counties, various types of information. If you're interested in this area of Texas, oh my goodness, what a great resource for you. Rhode Island from well over a decade ago, 14 years ago, a close-up of that table of contents page, a family history, census record, book reviews, additions and corrections, photographers from city directories. So just a plethora of really exciting information if this is the geographic area where you're doing your family history research. PERSI, the Periodical Source Index, is so good at this. What is this? This is the Idaho, as in way far from Indiana, the Idaho Genealogical Society Quarterly. It's from spring of 2011, so way more than a decade ago. Take a look at this table of contents page. About 2/3 of the way down, Wilson's in Hancock County, Indiana. And it's about a 5-page article. Who in the world would look for Wilson's who lived in Indiana in an Idaho quarterly? That's what PERSI does so well. It pulls articles out of obscurity and puts them where people who are interested in Hancock County, Indiana, and or Wilson's will find this article. So that's just a beautiful example. And a lot of our historical journals give us photographs that set context for the time in which our ancestors lived. We can find better stories. We can create better context when we can see photographs that are period photographs of the same time when our ancestors were there. Some of the genealogy publications, newsletters, etc., that have long ceased been published, and some that are still being published, are really ethnically focused as well as geographically focused, and those are precious. Take a look at the subtitle here. The Der Brief from 2009, well over a decade ago, Historical Society of North German Settlements in Western New York. How's that for specificity? And you will get very specific articles as well as photographs about families from that area across the pond to here in the United States in a specific region of New York. So pretty amazing things. So I hope I've gotten you at least a little excited about, hey, maybe the answer and the ancestor that has been eluding me, maybe that's in PERSI. It's so easy to use, but I think it's really fair to go through this little bulleted list of what PERSI is not. So first and foremost, PERSI is not Google or Bing or Amazon. I know, and it's a good thing generally. We've been kind of spoiled with really great search algorithms. We have said over and over, my colleagues and I know most all of you, Google is our friend. Google is one of the many powerful tools for genealogists. I hope this isn't heresy, but I would rate Google up next to family search and ancestry as something that genealogists must use all the time because it's so great at finding information on the web. So PERSI's not that, it's just not. It's not Amazon. Don't you love Amazon? Put in a few words, come up with all kinds of things. It's not Amazon either. So my colleagues and I have adapted this phrase during the pandemic. I'm going to offer it to you when you're thinking about all the warts and wrinkles on PERSI. When life gives you lemons, make lemonade. And I will strongly believe and put forth and advocate for PERSI giving you glass after glass of refreshing lemonade for your family history research. So not your typical index. What do I mean by that? When people hear index, they automatically, I think in most instances, jump to it's an every name index. I'm going to type in England, Shook, Jones, and get everything. Everything, even if it's just a little mention in an article. And that's where I have to pause again. It's not an article index either. So it's not an every name index. That's why we call it the Periodical Source Index. It gets you 2 articles, which we kind of endearingly call sources. So it's not every name. It's not an index to entire articles, as I just mentioned. Rather, it categorizes titles by the subject covered in the article, right? So if it's an article about baptisms from St. Simon Church in Washington, Indiana, it'll be in Davies County in PERSI, St. Simon Church, Washington, Indiana. If there's 5 pages of people who are baptized, none of those names will appear in the Periodical Source Index. None of the baptized will appear. The article will be indexed so that you can then access that article and look for the names that you're interested in. That third indented bullet point, I know some of you might say, oh my gosh, Curt, you all have been creating heresy, practicing heresy all these years. And my only comment to that is, I know, right? We have created some titles. The mantra for indexers is key what you see. We have created some titles because we're trying to provide better access. And before you pull your hair out or commend us to be the anti-indexers, Bones and Stones of McCracken County, Kentucky. What does that really tell you? You probably can guess it's a cemetery. You know that it's in McCracken County, Kentucky, but you really don't know what cemetery. If it's a list of Wilsons in all the cemeteries, or if it's a list of one church cemetery. So we will modify a lot of titles, and I'll own that. That's not how most indexing should be done. Key what you see is a really good mantra. But for every rule, there's an exception that proves the rule. There are many articles published at the turn of the last century that have no titles. So there's 3 really good paragraphs about a militia person in early colonial New York. Well, we have to title it to get it so that people will find those 3 paragraphs. It makes it a bear when you are just depending on the table of contents page for a periodical to say, wait a minute, they said this militia person was here in this New York periodical, but I don't see it in the table of contents page. Well, you have to look through the whole issue for it. So just want to show you some of the warts and wrinkles, articulate some of the warts and wrinkles of PERSI. I know some of you are probably pulling your hair out because you've already made your way down to the last bullet point there. There's no Boolean searching and there's no true truncation. I'll show you some ways of teasing out truncation, but there's no Boolean searching. I know, there should be. We would like that when we have time and resources, and we will continue to work toward that. But hey, we have over 3 million subject entries that we can play with right now, today, for free. First time ever since 1985 that PERSI has been available for free on the World Wide Web. So I hope I've gotten you excited. I hope we've kind of shared together the warts and wrinkles of good old PERSI. And I'll show you a cheat way of finding PERSI right now. Soon, as Elizabeth told you when she spoke on it earlier this year, this General Electric Collection button will be replaced with a PERSI button. So you just scroll down halfway down the page, click on this, boom, you'll be taken to PERSI. The URL is in the handout twice, but if you lose your handout or don't want to go back to it, if you just go explore genealogy, click on our resources, free databases. I know that's a lot of clicks, isn't it? But I just scroll down to Allen County. It's the county we're in. and we just zoom to the bottom of the page, there's the PERSI link. Ta-da! We have arrived at the Periodical Source Index. There really are 7 awesome ways to access articles in the Periodical Source Index. We're only going to concentrate on these 4 today, the ones that are geographically oriented. In concentrating on the geographically oriented ones, I always take pleasure in that because I fear so many of us focus almost exclusively on surnames. Of course, surnames are important and we want to find surnames, but taking a geographic approach, a geographic orientation, can really net some great results. So United States, Canada, British Isles. I know some kind of took issue with what we called British Isles. Again, we're not trying to redraw districts or political affiliations. We're just trying to categorize tens of thousands of periodical articles for which we have extracted 3 million plus subject links. So let's dive in. United States. So nothing fancy, fluffy about the Periodical Source Index, but I think you'll find the search screens really straightforward and easy to use. I, for one, enjoy that. I'm going to go to one of my ancestral counties because I know you're all interested in Witcher's genealogy. So we click on Indiana. That automatically fills the county area, even though you can't see it yet. So we click on the drop down for a county, and there they all are. And Du Bois County. And I click on search the Periodical Source Index. And there are all the articles categorized for Du Bois County, Indiana. So just in those quick steps, I've gone from 3 million subject articles down to several hundred. We have used the subject categories that you'll find on the bottom of the first sheet of your handout, those subject categories, as well as other categories to make it easier. So these several hundred articles, if all we're interested in is cemeteries, we can click on cemeteries. And there they all are. Scrolling down to the bottom, we can see that there are only 25 entries in all of the 3 million PERSI entries for Du Bois County cemeteries. Kind of surprises me because they've had an active genealogical society for a long time, but clearly they focused on other things. So we're going to take a look at some of the features of free PERSI online. Underneath the title, we try to always have what we call breadcrumbs. Like, here's where you are, and you head back through these breadcrumbs to take you right back to our original search screen. So we're in the cemeteries, and there's cemeteries for Du Bois County in Indiana, and we're doing a location search for the United States. If we thought, oh, this isn't what I want, and we want to go back to Du Bois County, we just click on that, boom, we're right back to our original list. And we say, boy, 25 cemeteries. I want a little meatier data set. So maybe I'm going to look, what the heck is other records? Let's look at these 50 other records. And we can just scroll down, ancestor account book, officials list, midwife certificate, Ferdinand Public Libraries, description of holdings. I have relatives in Ferdinand. That might be a curiosity to me. I can continue to explore all of these Du Bois County entries just by following the breadcrumbs back. Let's take a look at a larger data set. Let's go to history. We oftentimes ignore history because we think it's too large, too broad. You are defaulted to see the first 10 entries of every search result, but you have a choice of 25, 50, or 100. I usually like as large of a result set as I can view at one time. I think that's my impatient type A German personality coming out. So if I click on 100, you don't see anything change on what's viewable on your screen. But now our scroll bar has gotten longer and we have the first 100 entries. Down at the bottom, it tells you showing 100 of 156. Then it always tells you, hey, total number of items that your search found is 156. So you're always in the driver's seat, at least a little bit. So going back to Du Bois County, I'm going to go for a record group that's a little more meaningful. Let's do probate records. And so we can scroll down this list, and these titles line up pretty nicely, meaning it looks like they have all come from the Du Bois County Genealogical Society newsletter. And it looks like they're serially, issue after issue, publishing state indices for Du Bois County. Let's do another search. Let's go back to Location Search USA. Let's pick another state. Let's pick Washington, as in Washington State, not the District of Columbia. And then we automatically go to Washington State counties. One of my favorite counties is Walla Walla. Been there a couple times, and there's a Walla Walla town in Walla Walla, Washington. And when you say Walla Walla, people think you're just making something up. And no, you're not. So let's see what's in Walla Walla, Washington. Not a whole lot. Biography, cemeteries, census, church records. Let's again take a look at miscellaneous records. Maybe let's go school records. So here are the school records. This search box right here is if we wanted to narrow down, if we had a lot of large results, and I'll do an example with a really large data set in a few moments. But let's say we were searching for a year. Let's put it in the year 1945 when World War II ended. It only had one entry for 1945, and it's grabbing that from some metadata because it's not clear in the title here, but it came from some piece of metadata. But let's say I didn't do 45, I did 5. There we go. We have 0. We have absolutely no entries. If we go back 1, we'll pick up everything that has 1940 something in it. So down at the bottom, it says showing 1 to 4 of 4 entries, but these were filtered from the 25 total entries. So again, we try to keep you informed about where you're at in the search. So while there's no truncation technically, or how we're used to it, there is some form of quote unquote truncation. And if we just wanted the 1900s, we remove that. And again, we find more search results. 21 out of 25 are in the 20th century. I hope that makes sense. So you can see how you can narrow a larger search result. Let's go back to our wonderful Walla Walla, Washington, and let's take a large search result, history. 192 search results. And let's say we want to look at 50 at a time, and we put in 50. And maybe we're going to look for if there's any more Vaughns in here without us having to scroll through all of those. And I didn't spell it right, so nothing came up. I can continue as we just did in a previous example, going back character at a time to see if there's anything else close. When we get to VA, that's not too helpful, not too meaningful. But we have a lot of control, if I can use that word, in how we're doing searching. Let's go back to another state. Let's go to search the United States. Let's try North Carolina. There's some Quaker migration patterns from North Carolina to Indiana. So let's do North Carolina. And what county should we pick in North Carolina? Let's do Rowan County, North Carolina. Back in the 80s and 90s, the Rowan Register was the thing. And so many rich articles were published in that particular publication. So we click on that. Look how fast all these search results came back. There are hundreds of search results in many categories. You can see as we scroll up and down. So history, directories, court records. Let's take a look at this larger search result set, court records. One of the neat things about PERSI is you will notice these little arrows in the top fields. And this is how you can organize your titles. If they're presented in alphabetical order, if you'd like them in reverse alphabetical order, you can click on those little, what look like drop-down menus, but they're not. They're just ways of reorganizing your data set. You can do the same thing with periodical. Do I want it alphabetically or reverse alphabetic? Look at all these Rowan County registers. Amazing. We can organize the periodicals from the earliest to the latest, or the very latest to the earliest. And we can do the same thing with the publisher. We can organize it in alphabetical order or reverse alphabetical order. You might say, big deal, Curt, I don't care about putting the publishers in alphabetical order. I mean, I would kind of agree with you, except if you're really going after a particular publisher, once you've seen them and you want all the articles drawn together by one publisher, it's really nice when they can all be lined up in alphabetical order. It makes that process just a little simpler. Again, we can search through the article title here, and we can look for, maybe we're going to put in Quaker just to see if anything pops up. And here under court records, nothing pops up. If we do QU, there's so much. And here we see quarter session records. So there is a way of very roughly, and I'm using the term very loosely, truncate, if you will, or look for character strings, groups of letters. Groups of letters probably sounds better than character strings, but those of you who know about indexing and computers, what you're really seeing here is the computer's looking for character strings. It's really not looking for a collection of letters. And again, just a very rich. So maybe our eyes were piqued by, quarter session records, or maybe we see this one inquest. You say, I wonder how many other inquest articles there are. And it really does help to correctly spell it. And here we see nearly instantaneously that out of all these records, again, we see our result summary at the bottom, 4 entries from 223 that have inquest in the title. Please remember that there may be some information about a particular inquest or a series of inquests relating to a crime, a natural disaster, some unnatural deaths. But if it's not in the title, it may not get picked up because we're just trying to categorize the titles by the subjects that they cover. You can search in, as I suggest on the handout, you can search in this title field for surnames. If the surname's not in the title though, you're going to get a null result. You're going to get 0 results. And I would hate for that to like discourage you from using PERSI because, well, I did the location search, as you said, Curt, but I didn't find any of my family name. You really have to delve into the article, into the periodical to find your family name, your particular surname or surnames that you're looking for. I hope that makes sense. I think there's a lot of flexibility. We can go back to Rowan County. We can go back to North Carolina and pick a different county. Or no, this is actually statewide North Carolina. My apologies for misrepresenting that. Look how quickly tens of thousands of articles were returned for general North Carolina. All the North Carolina court records, maps, Mexican War. Only one Mexican border war in '59, but 6,200 military records. So if you want to cast a wider net, it's easy to do. This really can kind of take you down some really amazing paths where you can explore more deeply if there is anything in periodical literature for your geographic area of interest. So there's so much more we could do. We'll continue to show some features. Let's go back to the PERSI homepage and move over to our friends to the north, to Canada. We have a particularly large Canadian periodical collection. So we click on the drop down to identify a province. Let's go with Prince Edward Island. Click on the search bar, and here are all the articles that we have indexed from, or about, I should say, about Prince Edward Island province. We want to take a look at vital records. Same lineup, title, periodical, year published, and publisher. And I think you can evidence a little bit. Death records with Prince Edward Island connections, church and vital records, death by unnatural causes, obituaries. Go to the next set. You can see that many of the things that we find in book form, that we find online on websites, through Ancestry, Family Search, many of these same things are being published in periodical literature. Not the exact same things often, but similar types of things. So looking through the collection of Canadian materials in serial form is relatively easy. We haven't spoken a lot about these search boxes at the bottom. I find these most useful if you have a huge search result set and you really want to find a specific periodical or a specific publisher, or you want to say, I'm just interested in the 1987 publications. Notice how quickly, as you're typing in these search boxes underneath your search results, it just continues to manipulate your search results down to what matches. There's only one. 1987 published periodical that has an article that's indexed in PERSI. So there's all kinds of ways. You're right. It's not Google, it's not Amazon, but still there are ways that you can continue to play. And I use the word intentionally, play with your search result set to see if you can't find the article or articles that are most important for your research. I have often advised, and I will continue to do so, that when you arrive at a new database or a new version of an old friend database that you've used for many, many years, take time to play, push and pull, search for nonsensical things, see what happens as you're searching for a title and you're looking for school, and there's nothing in these set of search results, these 40 results. I mean, play with going back. Okay, I didn't get school, I got Nova Scotians. I thought I was in Prince Edward Island. Oh, okay, you make the connection. There's just a lot of playing that can be done, and it's useful to discovering everything that's possible in an index that's been around for a few years and continues to be added to. We're going to go back to our location, actually to our PERSI page, and we're going to go down to British Isles. Again, we have identified various countries that have been through literature, research, and history associated with the British Isles, and we have identified these geographic entities, territories, etc. And we click on ones that are interesting to us or that focus on our geographic area of interest. So we click on Ireland, and we click on the search, and again, thousands upon thousands of articles. There are 15,000 articles on the history of Ireland that have been indexed in PERSI. You saw how fast that search result came back, 15,000 articles. How do you digest, look at, survey 15,000 articles? Well, let's take a look. So we've clicked on that. Notice our page wiggles a little bit as it's trying to bring up all 15,000. We can narrow by a town or a county. So maybe it's just County Down that we're interested in, and we narrow that down. You can flip to the bottom of the page real quick, and we went from 15,000 down to 429. Well, that's kind of cool. Not that we necessarily want to look through 429, but oh my goodness, we definitely don't want to look through 15,000. So we're able to shrink this down. I should make mention that you'll notice that down isn't necessarily in anything you can see. So it may be in the metadata, or there may be something about County Down in the article. Also remember that as you're doing these narrowing searches, you could be picking up down in the name of the publisher. So it's bringing all of this under that search narrowing process. So it's title, periodical, and publisher. But still, I think we could call that useful, right? So going back to the British Isles, we can pick another Isle of Man. Again, click on search PERSI, hundreds of articles. I want to take a look at military records. Just a quick glance down through these records. It's amazing when you start using PERSI how quickly, easily, shall I say, that you become used to kind of a quick overview. Like you can go through 10 records in less than 10 seconds. Your eye is just looking for particular record groups, particular dates, particular words or phrases, and of course, particular surnames, right? So we can quickly use this nav bar at the bottom. I get kind of excited about the possibilities of discovering potentially useful information for my areas of interest. The last location of these 4, and I know we've gone through these quickly, but I really hope I'm encouraging you to play. It's free. You can use it anytime. It is kind of sort of mobile friendly, kind of sort of. We try to tweak and improve every day. But oh my gosh, if you're at home and you have insomnia, or you're at home and you're feeling particularly genealogically mischievous, and you just know today you're going to find something for your particular family research that enhances your story and again puts more flesh on the meat of your ancestors. Oh my goodness, PERSI's a thing for you. Now we change forms, or I should say change formats under other countries because we pick up so many different countries when we're indexing periodicals that we receive in the Genealogy Center. So be shocked. This is what you're first presented with when you click on other countries. It's just there's your A to Z nav bar. It's just a robust, quick list. Nav bar, or you can scroll down to the letter that you're interested in. Let's go down to the M's. We talked about our neighbors to the north. Well, our neighbors to the south, Mexico. These are all the articles that have been indexed out of periodical publications from Mexico. So we have over 1,100 military records, 500 church records. We click on those. This is the same format. So we can narrow by town and maybe we say Mexico City. Actually spelled that right this time. So that's awesome. So under church records, found 5. Go back to Mexico. Let's take a quick slog at this military records. Let's just see what all these military records are. So Mexican-American War, fighter squadron in World War II, pretty interesting things. So let's, we know this is a fighter squadron by the date here. What if we put in the search box here, World War? Notice that shrunk up our search results quite a bit. We only have 10 entries out of 1,500. To me, that would immediately say you're going to get World War I, which we see right here, but also immediately say I'm not getting everything. So maybe I do this, and maybe I do the little trick we tried before. We do 1945, and we get some search results, only 7 out of 1,100. But maybe we do this, 1940s, 40 anything. And now we have 101 search entries out of 1,100. So it's a great way, I believe, to play with the features that are presented on PERSI to actually see if there is something of consequence for finding your family stories. Let's go back to our other countries search. I was going to use another country here. And I'm I'm not seeing Marshall Islands. There we go. Very small number of entries, but again, a fairly consequential military records section. And these are articles, this is information that you'll be hard pressed to find anywhere else. You're not going to find many books. You know, Clyde Horton and the 4 other Marines from Kentucky in the Marshall Islands during World War II. This article will be indexed under Kentucky, but it's also indexed under Marshall Islands. So pretty neat things. So in your handout, toward the end of the handout, in fact, it's one of the last things, one of the last sections, I should say, in your handout is, okay, Curt, you've convinced me. I've searched PERSI and I've found some articles that I'm interested in looking at. There are 3 ways, at least 3, I should say, that you can find these articles. Number 1, I would just so strongly encourage you to contact the publisher. With every single article, you have the specific issue detail, you have our call number, probably won't help you with the publisher, but you have volume 1, issue 1, spring of 2017, and you have the publisher's address. Write to the publisher, Google the publisher's name, see if they have a website that you can submit an electronic query. I do that all the time before I write because I'm an impatient type A German. I would like it yesterday. I'm sure we all can embrace that a little bit. So Google Veterans Voices Writing Project. Is there still an active organization doing that? This is a few years ago, 5 years ago. Do I have contact information? And then ask about this particular article that you want to get a copy of it. You want to get access to it. Who knows, particularly in the United States, in Canada, we know that a lot of societies have published ancillary materials to their serials, their quarterlies, their newsletters, their monthlies. So in contacting the society, we may actually get pointed to a website that is rich in data that helps us find more about our story. So I would offer to you that the number 1 way to get a copy of an article is to contact a publisher. And that's so easy to do in PERSI. Number 2 is to see if there's a library close to you. If you're close to the Allen County Public Library, if you're close to Fort Wayne, Indiana, oh my goodness, are you in for a treat? Everything that's indexed in PERSI is available in the library here in Fort Wayne, in the Genealogy Center. We have one of the largest collections of historical, ethnic, and genealogical publications in the entire Milky Way galaxy. And go ahead, challenge me on that. I'll have fun. I'll have fun proving it to you. That it is an amazing number. We have a great colleague who does such an awesome job getting and keeping these periodicals up to date and going after back issues. So number 1, contact the publisher. Number 2, look for a library close to you. How do you do that? It's in your handout, worldcat.org. It's the largest online catalog to tens of thousands of libraries. Put in this periodical title and then follow the instructions in the handout to get to a place where you can put in your zip code and see which libraries are the closest to you. Now, some library or libraries may be like 30 minutes away. Some libraries may be like 37 hours away. So that would be not very close. Your third option is to write to the Genealogy Center. Actually, to email us with the titles that you like. There's information again in your handout to help you do that. So I think we've arrived at about the 45-minute mark, and this is kind of where I wanted to be. We could continue doing lots of geographic searches, but I want to pause here and see if there are any questions that people have from the 45 minutes that we've spent together.
There are many questions,
Okay.
and I am going to preface this portion of today's program by saying, if we do not get to all of your lovely questions, send us an email. We're more than happy to answer your questions and help you find the information you need.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
Questions. Okay. So the first question, somebody was asking about how when PERSI was on Find My Past, They could filter by journal and then sort by year and then search. So would it be possible to filter by journal?
Well, you would want to pick one of these 7 general areas,
Right.
get a search result set. Then you can organize that search result set by journal. Right now, there isn't a really good way to say, I want all the articles that have been published in the Du Bois County Genealogical Society newsletter. There's not a great way of doing that. You can probably piecemeal it together. That's another feature that we're considering for the future. I don't know, Elizabeth, if any of the questions are, well, what if I want to search for the compilers of the article, the authors and compilers, people who have written the articles? We made a decision a generation ago that that wasn't a key piece of information. I've heard from many people over the generation that we've been doing PERSI saying, oh gosh, Curt, it would have been really helpful. We did not, we have not, and likely for the immediate future, we will not. We're just trying to get more articles available. But to the question, Elizabeth, there's no good way to say in this particular, County Kildare journal.
I could show an example of how you would do it. If you don't mind me sharing my screen. Okay. So as Curt mentioned, you would have to pick one of, I picked the wrong link. Here we go. You have to pick one of these categories. So just to show you an example, if I went to Ireland, just leaving that blank. So this is nationwide, and I picked just, I'll just pick history, right? So this is going to be a big one. So it might take a second to load because there's over 15,000 articles.
Right.
So once it's up, you can either search from the top or
The very bottom.
Or the very bottom. Here we go. So if I was to search Air Ireland, which is the name of a periodical that I just know of, it would come up in this column. So that's one way if you want to see, I want to know about all of the periodicals that Air Ireland has in just this like history category. This will work. So that's one way of doing it. And you could do that with the other subject categories too.
And before you leave this, Elizabeth, not that it matters a whole lot to many people, it might matter to some. In that year published column, then you can organize them chronologically. So you could say, okay, I have everything from Air Ireland. I want to see the oldest to the newest. I want to explore oldest to newest, or vice versa. I want to see the newest to oldest.
Okay, so let's go back to these questions. So somebody was wondering, are periodicals from many years ago still added, or is it only new ones? There was somebody else who asked, what years are indexed?
Yeah, so there's more that has been published and continues to be published than we can actually do in one calendar year. So we kind of have what sounds like an unorganized approach, but there's really a lot of organization to it. So in the heyday of the project, we had 2 teams working on 1985 on back, publication dates, and 1986 forward. Now we have one really mighty but small team, and they're doing a combination. So we have dozens of periodicals that we know people like to use because they're so information rich. Those are kind of at the top of the list. And then as we can, we pick off what we call legacy issues, the older issues. So we're doing both. I probably shouldn't disclose this, but one amongst us, not me, who shall be nameless, thought that, if we indexed about 250, 260,000 entries, we'd pretty much have the world of periodical literature indexed. We're at 3.03 million entries. And I'm thinking we're maybe at 60, 62%. So boy, were we way we were way off in our initial predictions. So we continue to add both. Short answer, we continue to add both. So it's free. So come back periodically to take a look to see if we've added some more things. Just amongst a small number of friends, if there's a particular periodical that you have found rich in your research, and you say, gosh, I know this is still being published, but the index, the most recent, the latest one is 2015. Send us an email. Don't tell anyone, but send us an email and say, hey, what about the sunflower from Kansas? I know it's still being published. What about the more current issues? And you might be surprised how fast they appear in PERSI.
Okay, so let's see. This is a good question. So somebody was asking if we had a LibGuide for PERSI that a society or libraries can copy for their use, or can they use the handout? So can they circulate the handout as a resource for people?
Certainly, definitely circulate the handout. You do have our permission to do so, absolutely. We're not opposed either to you sharing the recording when it's on our YouTube channel. We're in the process of creating another more thorough, but yet more concise, with pictures and kind of like, here's where you click kind of things, to really how you use PERSI and some tips. It's just changed so radically, coming from behind large information aggregators paywalls to a free database. And the library is doing another fairly significant technology upgrade that may open some windows for us. So Elizabeth, you nailed the answer right away. Use the handout. Boom. Absolutely. Use the YouTube. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I do want to mention that if you guys, when using PERSI, you have thoughts, suggestions, comments, things that maybe don't make sense to you, send us an email, because it's not behind a paywall. We're more accessible. If you think something's acting kind of wonky, tell us. We take your feedback really seriously, because you're the ones who are using it the most. So
absolutely,
definitely send us an email.
Great point, Elizabeth. Great point.
Okay, so there are a couple questions about language. So I'm going to kind of group those together. So when searching for places that are non-English speaking countries, right, are the subjects going to be in the original language or translated? And when they say subjects, I assume they actually mean the article titles.
The article titles will be verbatim-ish to what you see in the periodical. We may leave some words out, etc., but we don't translate the article titles. But the subjects will be English subjects. The periodical title, if it's in French, it'll be in French. If it's in Swahili, it will be in Swahili. If it's in Spanish, because it's been published in Mexico, the title will be in Spanish, but the actual subjects will be in English. If that's what the person was asking.
Right. But I hadn't had a chance myself to actually look at this. The article titles wouldn't include things like an umlaut or an asterisk mark. Yeah. So that's something that will be omitted. So that's something to keep in mind.
All those diacriticals do not come through.
And as far as this other question regarding language, this person was asking, are there language options available when non-English text is involved? I assume that this person would mean the actual article. You would just have to translate it in some way. This person mentioned what they use to translate stuff, and that would be the way to go.
Right.
Yeah.
So, not to be redundant, but looping back to the beginning of our time together, Google's our friend. Find if you can get an e-copy of the article. There are so many translators. Everyone has their own little favorite. Google Translate, Babelfish. I mean, there's so many.
Yeah. And someone did ask if PERSI articles can be found on Google through Google. It depends.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it
Yeah.
depends. The most frustrating answer a genealogist can hear, it depends.
Yeah. Usually if it's public domain or not, if
Right.
if someone's given permission to post it online.
Right.
It all depends. Okay. So this is a fun question that's
Okay.
a little bit more specific. My ancestor was involved in a church riot
Mhm.
in Scotland in 1823. And they mention where specifically. It's around Inverness. How would I look for articles about church riots in Scotland?
That is a great question.
I thought it was great. So
Thanks for pulling that out. So I'd go to the British Isles. I would search Scotland and nothing else, so I would get this huge search result set. And then see, I would look under church records, even though it's not really church records, it's church riots. But I would do that. And then what we have under church records, yeah, we have 1100. So we could open that up and we could put riot,
funerals, riot, and drunkenness. So maybe this is not going to pertain to what
Right.
you're looking for, but you could also try.
What about history?
Yeah.
History. That's a huge set. And if we have a date, I'll always remember, just plug in the date just to see. If it was in the title, maybe it'll pop through. So there are some riots there, not for the date we want though, is it?
It's, let's see. It might be somewhere in here. You'd have
Right.
to kind of go through them, but this is how you would do that.
Right.
You would kind of think of, okay, well, what subjects does this thing I want to know more about touch on?
Right.
And then
Right.
search within that. Okay, so we are running very low on time. So I'm going to group just a couple more questions together, but if you
Sure.
guys have more questions, definitely send us an email. We're more than happy to answer all of your wonderful questions. Okay, so is there a way to highlight the articles you were interested in and create a list you can print? So there were a couple people that asked about making lists. You can just print the page. Right.
So in PERSI, there's no like check box. You can like check the box and then everything that you've checked, you can. I know it's not everyone's favorite answer, but sometimes I think we forget about the simple. So yeah, Elizabeth is showing you can just print the whole thing. But if you really only want 3 out of that 3 pages, you can highlight them, copy and paste it into Notepad, Word, whatever your favorite word processing program is. And that'll work as well.
My favorite thing to do is I actually use the snipping tool and just screenshot sections, because sometimes it'll be a long list, but I'll want like 3 at the top, 3 in the middle. So, and then I can just make my own list that way.
Right. Many options. Yeah.
Okay.
Someone mentioned in chat that Snagit is a program as well, but you know,
right.
A clipping tool of sorts. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So there's some very great questions in here. I'm going to end on one final question that I think you are the only person amongst us who could answer this question.
That sounds ominous.
To what extent have the subject categories changed or have been added over time since PERSI was started? So like what would be the best way to structure and vary searches to find everything that could be found?
Yeah, that is a great question for which I don't have like a really
not a concrete answer.
Platinum answer, but there's a reason why I took up a little space in the handout, not just to take up space, but those subject search terms, those 4 columns of search terms at the bottom of page 1 of your handout, those were the core search terms, and we still use those as core identifiers. core categorization labels for periodical articles. Our great contemporary indexing team that started probably a decade ago started adding other subject terms, and we've used technology to pull out some other subject terms. That's why you see some ethnic groups in different subject listings when you look for Kentucky records or Ireland records or Scotland records. But that core list in your handout, that's the list of subject categorizations that have been used and continue to be used. So from the beginning till now, we do try to focus on if there's a lot of data on a particular war, instead of putting that all under military, which gets huge really fast, we'll say World War I, World War II, Mexican-American War, etc. Instead of making it even more difficult to find information on particular ethnic groups, we'll call out those articles for African Americans, Polish, I mean, whatever large ethnic group is covered. I know some will disagree with me as far as a search strategy, but I really like when looking for a state in the United States and a county, just to do state, county, and nothing else, just so I get an idea of the number of results and then what kind of results, and then see in that list how they shake out. Oh, there are a lot of cemeteries here, not so many court records. There's almost always huge history, which I think discourages people from looking at it, but click on it every once in a while and then search through it and see what kind of data is in history. You might be surprised. Technical terms, stuff that doesn't fit in the other categories, may be hiding in plain sight under that subject heading, history.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you again, everybody, for joining us.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Curt, for such a wonderful program. As I said, if you guys have more questions, send us an email if you just want to say hello, or if you have ideas on other programs we can give. We always love when you guys have, interesting ideas. So definitely reach out to us. I put our email a couple times in the chat, but it is genealogy@acpl.info. Thanks again, everybody, and have
Absolutely.
a good day.
See you on Thursday evening. Take care.
Bye.